In my last video on Marathon, I said that the art direction was poor. And I'm wrong. The art direction isn't just poor. The entire pipeline with the art department at Bungie is broken. Salam, my name is Mustafa. I'm a professional game developer. I have experience working at Treyarch during the development of Black Ops 4. I've worked at Zwift on their indoor cycling game. Currently, I work on independent games. I have a narrative-driven tower defense game on Steam, and I'm currently working on a first-person stealth horror game called Beware Tomorrow, coming soon. Links to both of those games are in the description below. I'm sure that most of you have already heard of the details with Bungie and the stolen art. I'm not going to go over all the details, but for the few of you who haven't heard, I'm going to quickly give a summary because this is not a news channel. This is more about me giving my opinion on the situation. This situation has been ongoing and it's been updating rapidly. New things have been coming out every few days. It's been brought to light that there is an independent artist named Fern. She goes by Antireal online. In 2017, she developed a cyberpunk style and made some posters that she posts online. Her art assets were stolen and ended up in Marathon. There are those who are even arguing that the entire game's aesthetic was stolen from her. Even the type of music that she made that accompanies her posters were copied. They copied the music, but they stole the art assets. There are art assets in the game that were made by an artist that they did not pay. And that's not plagiarism, that's stealing. They are literally using something that isn't theirs. Joseph Cross, the art director at Marathon, has admitted that this is true. But people online have also found that Joseph Cross, as well as other artists at Bungie, have been following Antireal on Twitter for years, so they've known of her for a long time. Joseph Cross admit that the art assets were in the game, but he didn't take ownership of the mistake. He blamed it on an artist that no longer works for Bungie. Now I'm going to chime in on the situation. Even if what he's saying is true, he is still to blame for the situation because he's the art director. In game development, there is a development pipeline. There's a chain of command. It goes from one person to another. It gets submitted, it gets reviewed, it gets verified, and it's not just one person who puts in something and that's it. As the art director, one of his roles is asset review. He oversees the visual direction of the game, and he also approves or he delegates approval of the visual sign-off of the assets. Regardless as to whether he does the approval himself or he delegated to somebody else, it is still his responsibility to approve the assets that get signed off. So the way how I see it, there are two possible failures here. Either he is negligent and he didn't do a good job figuring out what his employees did, and he allowed in something that isn't supposed to be in the game, or he's complacent. He knew about it and approved it anyways. Either way, it's still bad. Even if it was an accident, he still looked it over. Apparently, he didn't know what his own employee did. He approved it, and he let it into the game. The blame falls on him. Some people are blaming it on mood boarding. Mood boarding is actually very common practice, but what isn't common practice is taking from the mood board and putting it straight into the game. For example, a mood board would be like if I were to work on Batman Beyond and say, okay, I'm going to take inspiration from Blade Runner. It's one thing to put down different screenshots from Blade Runner and then make my own stuff based off those screenshots, but it's completely different when you just take those screenshots and put it straight into your project. One is using as inspiration and the other one's just straight up stealing. Again, it still comes down to the art director's responsibility as to whether they are taking from the mood board or if they're just using the mood board as inspiration. Either he didn't do a good job enforcing a proper review, or he intentionally let it in thinking that they're going to get away with it. Now that we know that the art is stolen and the entire style is stolen, it makes sense as to why the game looks bad. And I'll explain to you, there's two main reasons why. First of all, it clearly is not their style. No one at Bungie came up with the style itself. And because it's not their style that they came up with, they don't understand the style. No one is there to help implement it into the game. It's one thing to see something and know that it looks cool, but then it's a completely other thing to see something, realize it looks cool, but understand why it looks cool. And no one at Bungie understood why it looks cool, so they weren't able to implement it into the game. And the second reason is because not everything can translate well from 2D artwork into a 3D world. Just because it looks cool on a poster doesn't mean it's going to look cool in a 3D game. For example, we could take any famous artist. There's so many great pieces of artwork in the world, but not all of them are going to make a very cool video game world. And even then, it takes the right mind to understand how to make it work into a 3D world. It takes some serious skill to pull it off. And Marathon shows no skill, just stolen ideas and poor execution. The art director appeared on a live stream responding to the situation. He clearly looked distressed and uncomfortable. He admitted to the asset theft publicly. He looked unprepared, stressed out, full of anxiety, lacked professionalism in response. He made Bungie look worse by showing lack of control over the pipeline. Whether it was intentional or if it was an oversight, I think he should be fired. And this has nothing to do with cancel culture. I do not promote cancel culture. Cancel culture is about trying to get people fired over things that they say or opinions that they have. This is about him not doing his job. In my opinion, it appears that he did not do his job. AAA leadership must be held accountable. Leadership positions must take ownership and must be held accountable. This is leadership failure, not just a mistake. This isn't even the first time Bungie has been caught stealing in recent years. This is actually the fourth time they've been caught since 2021. Their art development pipeline clearly is broken. If they are consistently being caught stealing artwork, there's a fundamental problem with their development pipeline. Now, this situation is really bad. It's going to be very difficult for Bungie to walk away from this looking good. But I still have the same opinion in which I had during my previous video on Marathon, that the game was doomed. Marathon is an extraction shooter. The genre is niche with a steep learning curve. It's not very accessible to casual players. The game has no standout mechanics or hook against their competition. The original reveal had so much backlash. The art style was criticized day one. And yeah, there are some people now who are starting to say, yeah, the art style looks cool because of the fact that they're attributing it to Antireal, but my opinion still stands. It still looks bad because they don't understand what made Antireal's artwork look good. The game looks incomplete, the character designs are noisy, it lacks clarity, and poor gameplay readability. Even without the art theft, the game was still going to struggle. This whole stolen artwork controversy is just the cherry on top of this entire mess of a game. The Arc Raiders Alpha outperformed Marathon in every way. While Marathon's Alpha was losing players every day, players praised Arc Raiders' dynamic PvE and robot AI encounters. Marathon's PvE felt static and uninspired. Arc Raiders had immersive world building and standout visuals. Marathon maps felt cramped, repetitive, and unclear. Arc Raiders had a rewarding skill tree and persistent base building. Marathon punished players with no progress or tension. One feels like a full game and the other feels like a soulless extraction demo. Arc Raiders even has proximity chat, which Bungie refuses to add into the game. Arc Raiders is doing everything better, and Bungie is doing nothing better and nothing new. So what do I think is going to happen to this situation? We're likely not going to hear any outcome. The lawyers of Bungie are going to likely reach out to Antireal and or her lawyers, and they'll give her some sort of a settlement payout and have her sign an NDA so she's not allowed to talk about it. This is standard practice to have an NDA signed. Joe Cross confirmed that they are actively taking out art assets that aren't theirs. But the game isn't delayed. People are speculating that this means that Sony wants Bungie to fail, and which will likely lead to Sony having a full acquisition of the studio. My opinion is that they won't shut down the studio when this game fails. The reason being is that the name Bungie still holds a lot of weight. In my last video on Marathon, there was at least one knucklehead who was criticizing me for speaking against one of the greatest developers of all time. And this just shows that there are people who don't understand that Bungie of today are not the same people who made Halo. They're only the same studio by name at this point. But because there are still people like that, the name Bungie still holds weight, and Sony will want to keep that name Bungie. This situation is clearly the final straw on the camel's back, because not even the journalists who have traditionally defended these studios are defending this. For example, Paul Tassi, who was cautiously optimistic of the game when it was revealed, he is now saying Marathon is, quote, just over, end quote. Not just because of the art theft, but he's also calling out Bungie's leadership and the game itself. When the usual defenders of your studio are against you, that's a clear sign your days are numbered. If you got this far, let me know in the comments below if Bungie has any chance of surviving. Please like and subscribe to help boost the algorithm for this channel. Thank you, take care, salam.